Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to first off start off with introduction. So where did you start off in your publishing process? Were you traditional or indie, and why did you choose to go that way?
I started off, first of all, thanks for having me. This is so fun. I started off traditional because when I started, there really wasn't much option for indie. I've been trying to write for forever. I got a master's of fine arts in writing, and I just kept failing to finish a book. But in 2006, I tried NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, for the first time and finished a book. And from that book, I sent it out and got an agent, and she sold it in 2008. And really the self-publishing revolution didn't start to happen until about 2010 or so. So she sold it in a 3-book deal. The first book came out in 2010. And so then there was a book 2010, 2011, 2012. And then we sold more. So I was pretty firmly in that 1 book a year traditional model. I was with HarperCollins, and I loved it. And I still, I still always say that anybody who wants to be traditional published should still be trying to do it if they want to do that. And I know we'll talk more about that. And for me, but I always like to mention that for me, it was partly ego. I really, and that's okay too, if people have that in them. Like if you want to walk into a bookstore and see your book on a bookshelf that you didn't get placed there, that is a fine reason for continuing to go after it. However, it was probably about 2010 or 2011 when I was at a conference, and a friend of mine, Bella Andre, took me out to lunch, and we were just chatting over lunch. It was just me and her, and she had just gotten some rights back to her books. And I'd been around her in the few years before that. She couldn't sell another book to New York. She had been mid-list, but slipped, and nobody wanted another book traditionally from her. And she said, Rachel, I got my rights back to some of these books, and I put them up on the internet. I don't even know. I mean, we called it self-publishing, but definitely wasn't called indie then. And she said, I am making like $50 a month on books I recently wrote. And I was like, wow, you're kidding. That's a lot of money for books you already wrote. And then, as some of us know, many of us probably know, Bella Andre became the first millionaire to do self-publishing with her backlist. And another friend of mine, Barbara Freethy, did the same thing. And they were kind of like these overnight success stories in the indie publishing world because they had a lot of backlist. They had been in traditional for a long time, and they were able to just push them out. And it was really stunning and revolutionary to watch and witness. And she kept telling me, you've got to do this. You've got to self-publish. And my brain was still like, oh, no. That's, back then it still had such a stigma around it. I can't do that. And in many ways, I wish that I had started sooner. For me, the route I think the next question, or one of the questions, is the route that I took to
Hybrid,
Indian
yeah.
hybrid. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you asked, because it was a really circuitous, weird route. My first 3 books were traditionally published by HarperCollins. It was a series. And my agent also that was HarperCollins. My agent also sold that series to Penguin Random House in Australia, because she kept world rights. In Australia and New Zealand, it became a bestseller. People loved those books. In America, I couldn't sell them. They did fine, but the first book did fine. The second 2 books just flopped. So HarperCollins did not want to renew the contract. They wanted no more books in that series. However, Australia, Penguin Random House did, because it was just Penguin then. And so they paid me good money to write those books, and they did all the, professional editing, copy editing, proofing, all of that. But they only had rights to sell them in Australia and New Zealand. So now I had these 2 books in the series that were not going to be published anywhere in the world. And nobody wanted them in America because HarperCollins didn't want them, and nobody wanted books 4 and 5 of a series that a different publisher had, which makes total sense. So I decided to self-publish them, and I learned from that experience that it was so fun to have that control. I just enjoyed the whole process so much. And then Penguin wanted another 3 books from me in a different series, and the same thing happened. So the books themselves were hybrid, which is how I got into hybrid publishing. They were traditionally published in the Antipodes, and I self-published them everywhere else. And I really got the taste for it. And those were in the romance. I write in 5 different genres, but those were in the romance genre, which sells really well in the indie space. So then I wrote another 2 series. Yeah, I wrote another 2 romance series, 4 books and 3 books that I put out there all just by myself. I didn't even offer them to my agent. I just self-published them. And since then, I have also self-published 3 works of nonfiction. I recently got the rights back for a memoir that was 10 years old. So I did a 10-year anniversary edition of that, added some more essays, and I did the audiobook, which my publisher at the time had never wanted to have done, and I didn't have the rights to do it. So I was able to do the audiobook for myself for A Life in Stitches, which has been just so amazing. And I recently got back the first 3 books in that original series. So now I own all 5 books in that series all over the world. So I was really kind of prevented for a long time to do anything. Like I could sell books 4 and 5 at $3.99 or $4.99, but the first 3 books all sold at $9.99 for an ebook, and they were 10 years old. Nobody was going to pay that. So having total control over those books now has been really, really fabulous. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that's great. It's, this whole thing, talking to other authors, like really having the real conversations, where most of it's offline, but I'm trying to like be more transparent that like
we need that in this industry.
Yeah. Like one route is not good or bad.
Right.
But pushing them together sometimes makes it even better because you get like all the pros of all of them. I was going to ask if you got the rights back to that first series, because I was curious.
Just a few months ago, actually. It took a long time. And I was actually stymied for a while. And no shade on HarperCollins. I loved being there. I loved my editor. However, the person that they have in charge of rights reversions, because we're, speaking specifically about this, is really, really old school and needs a letter mailed to her. It's like practically a fax machine. And so finally she emailed me back. Yes, you can have the rights back for books 1 and 3, but there are still, I think there were 78 or 80 books in the warehouse from more than 10 years ago now. And they said, you can't have your rights back if there's any books in the warehouse. And I was like, well, this is terrible. What am I going to do? And then I thought, oh, I could just buy them all at the special sales rate that authors get and purchase them. So there are ways to work around things to get your rights back to, which you know all about.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was part of it too. I should check my contract to make sure that's not a thing.
I haven't heard about it from anybody else but HarperCollins, but I've heard about it now from multiple HarperCollins authors. So just know that
those are Harper. So and those are my only paperbacks that I have with them. So now I'm curious.
Yeah, you should
look at it. Because I think it's, it's an ever evolving process too with publishing, that it's like, if it's not doing something, like if it's just sitting there, like why not take it back? And thankfully I've had an okay process asking. There hasn't been like anyone, well, sometimes I get pushback, but usually when I ask for it too soon, but then, it usually works out fine. I've thankfully just done email, so I haven't done the official letter yet.
It was hard. And then she was having to email me back while I was in the process of moving to New Zealand, and I had no address for about 6 months. And I was like, can you please use email for this?
Fax it. We'll find a fax machine. So that's great. So that's your move into, being a hybrid author overall. Like if you want to dive in a little more about which books of yours are traditional and which books are indie, and then how do you sort of make that decision? And I watch your podcast, so I know you're sort of working on it with your current memoir. Like how do you make the decision on which book goes where?
That's such a good question. And it's hard to answer. There are some easy answers, like if you're writing romance, I personally don't know why anybody would go traditional anymore. And I'm sure, and there are reasons, and there are, big, great names who are, I'm sure, making great money and doing that. But romance readers are so voracious, and it's just so nice to make that 70% of your royalty rate from the e-vendors. And I'm wide, I publish wide. So I'm on all the vendors, not exclusive to Amazon. And I hope I keep it that way, but we are always iterating and changing things around here and trying new things. So for me, if I write romance, which I'm really on a break from, but if I write romance, it's self-published. Most of my writing about writing, I wrote a book that was based on a class I taught at Stanford, which is called Fast Draft Your Memoir, and Letters to a New Author, which was really just a compilation of encouraging emails that I send out. So that was a really small, quick book to put out. Those are self-published, didn't offer them to my agent. In moving forward, what I would like to do is for my agent to give her things like the thriller that I write, continue to publish traditionally if Penguin wants me back. I have not blown up and gone supernova yet, although I do have a paperback of Hush Little Baby coming out next month, so crossing fingers on that. But so she keeps those kind of things, or she doesn't keep anything. What I do is I retain the right to give those to her, and she can try to sell them. When I got my memoir, Life in Stitches, back, I have just had so much fun and so much success at republishing it and actually learning how to advertise, to really advertise, to get it to sell well. That has been so fun that when I was writing this second memoir that I'm finishing, that I've been working on for about 4 years off and on between projects, I was just planning on self-publishing it. And there's probably more like a 95% chance that I will self-publish it. And then I get to do all these really fabulous, fun things like connecting it to a Life in Stitches and, doing read through and pushing readers through and doing fun advertising things with it. However, as I have been revising it, I've kind of fallen in love with it more than I had been. And so I have given this it's not an ultimatum. It's just a simple offer to my agent. And I have told her she may have 2 months with the book. I plan on sending it to her at the end of this week. The final revision is happening. I hired an editor, paid the big money to get a great edit done on it. And I've been doing those revisions. And I'm giving her 2 months to bring me big money. And that's capital B, capital M, big money. Because I feel like in traditional publishing, I have remained so solidly mid-list that, and I'm going to throw numbers around because we're not transparent enough in that too. I would predict that I would get this book sold. It's a good book. And I would predict that with my sales track record, they would offer me $30,000, let's say, depending on which publisher we go for. And $30,000 is not enough for me after four years of work, 35% to taxes, 15% to my agent. So now we're looking at $15,000 for 4 years worth of work. And to lose the right to control that book in the future, because contracts are getting better and better, being able to revert your rights back to you is going to get harder and harder as contracts are getting stronger and stronger. So if they do a cover that I hate, if they put literally no advertising into it, if they do not get it into Target, Walmart, Costco, if they are just not able to do that and it ends up not even on a co-op table at Barnes & Noble and nobody reads it, and now I've gotten $15,000 for a book of my heart, that's going to break my heart. So I decided I can ask her to go get big money, which to me means over 6 figures and higher. And if not, I'm just going to self-publish it because I'm really, really happy. And I want to self-publish it with this outside chance of her selling it for good money. So I think it's kind of this fun experiment that I'm running. And like I said, there's not the biggest chance that somebody's going to go, oh, she's the new Elizabeth Gilbert, give her 7 figures, but you never know. And I have an agent and she might as well throw the spaghetti at the wall. And then I know how to sell it and I can continue selling it as a self-published book for the rest of my life. So yeah, there's kind of it's a win-win situation, I think.
I find that thought process so interesting, and it's definitely going to, be a part of mine, with future books. Now you said you had this book edited already. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you would do with future books? Like, would you have it edited beforehand and then try to sell it to the big four?
I never have. It's always been me and my agent, and she was an editor before she was an agent. She is a great editor, and she's a really frustrating editor in that, we have sometimes spent a year going back and forth on, my first thriller. I probably took a year and 7 different versions for her to get it just right in order to feel confident to take it out because the market is difficult and she wanted to sell it well. And all of that worked, but I'm not willing to do that with her for an unsold book anymore. So I hired the editor for the memoir because I was planning on self-publishing. But once I did the edit, I was like, this, I think an editor would read and want to have in their roster. And perhaps they won't. We never, ever, ever know what is happening in traditional publishing, and traditional publishing is a difficult place to be. So I have no clue about that. But I to answer your question, I am kind of playing with this idea. Like, I'm writing this women's fiction, light magical realism novel right now, and I'm planning on self-publishing it. And I have my editor, a different editor for fiction, lined up to receive it in July. And I might try the same experiment with my agent. Just, here's 2 months. Don't bother, Susanna. You don't have to read it hard. Just give it a skim, write the letter, send it out to the editors of the publishing houses. And if no go, then 2 months later, I'll take it back and do exactly what I had planned to do with it. But, the editing is done. The revision is, I would just have to get copy edits and proofs. The thing about, selling one of those then to a traditional publishing house is it would only make it better, because now you've got a second excellent editor working with you. And anyone could keep editing and revising their books forever, ever. And we don't do that. We have to make that choice of when to stop. So yeah, it is an interesting way of moving forward. But if I were going straight for traditional publishing, because I have an agent, no, I would not normally hire an editor.
Yeah, I was just curious because I never really thought of that. I'm currently working on a thriller now to self-publish that I initially queried, and it didn't, nothing came from it. And when I heard you talking about that, I was like, I wonder if I was to send it to some agents, because I'm going through copy edits in 2 weeks. So
if you can take the time, like, why not? If you give it 2 or 3 months, like a really short time boxed frame, or a month, or whatever it is that you feel like playing with. Yeah. But I am also impatient. And when I have a book, I'm like, I want people to read it right now. Yeah.
I know that's the difficult part of it, but that's also the plus side of indie publishing, is that you can get it out when it's done.
Yeah.
So the next question was more about your agent and how they factor in, which we sort of get an idea of. But how did these conversations go with her? Is she like totally open for it? Because I've never really heard of an agent like really talk about hybrid authors and like how they feel about it, because I'm sure it's difficult on their end as well.
It's really a strange conversation to have, because what you're saying is, I work with you, you're my partner in this business, and I don't want you to have this money, and I'm not offering it to you. And that's really awkward to say. And especially with the reversions, asking for reversions, I try to keep her out of it as much as possible, because if my very first book suddenly blew up on TikTok, right? And it was still with HarperCollins, she would be making 15% of the millions of dollars now that I'm making. Because I asked for the reversions, she would get none. But she was an instrumental part of that book coming to market, right? So kind of carefully avoid talking about that, but we are friends. And I have been now full-time doing this. I quit my old day job 6 years ago this month. So I've been doing this for 6 years, and she has been worried about me for 6 months. So she's also really good at asking the questions. Are you making money? How much are you making? Are you going to live under a bridge? So whenever I tell her, like at the beginning of this year, I had ads working. They have but I was making like $1,000 a week, for this 10-year-old memoir that I had re-released. And she was so thrilled to hear it, because that book had gone out of print, I think 3 years after it came out. So it was still available e-version, but nobody could have bought the paper book in forever. And half of those book sales are in paper. So she's thrilled when I ask her these things, but she also wants, there's definitely part of her that wants to, make money. She wants me to have the breakout success and for her to get 15% of it. And I would like nothing more than that. But I think being open and honest and transparent and saying, this is really an awkward thing to say to you, Susanna, but I'm not going to offer you this book. This one I'm going to self-publish. And then to send her an email in the middle of the night saying, no, wait a minute, you can have it for 2 months because it's pretty good.
Well, that's a great relationship. I mean,
she's wonderful
to be able to ask that. Yeah.
That's
great. In your opinion, what are the benefits of being a hybrid author?
Date a guy whose name I can't remember. I think he finally was a guy with a name, but he proved a few years ago that hybrid authors just make more money than traditional published authors or indie published authors, because I think you have one foot in both streams. I probably not everyone will probably say this, but I have the extreme ADHD, and I love having a foot in both streams and being able to pivot and do things quickly and try things. Yesterday was, Easter Sunday, and I got up at 4:30 a.m. because I couldn't stop thinking about trying some new covers for this other series that I got a book bub on. And with a new cover, it's going to look even fresher. And it's like, the cover's like 6 years old. Maybe I'll get a new cover. So I got up to do that. And I love being able to follow where my brain and my interest goes. Other benefits of being hybrid. It's just, you get a nice mix of the control and lack of control. And for me, I think that's a very healthy thing for me to have. Hush Little Baby came out in hardcover in 2021, mid-pandemic, and sold to like no one bought this. It wasn't in the bookstores. It didn't get any co-op anywhere. But yet I know it's my best book. It's the best book that I've written so far. And having to bump against that kind of thing, like in your brain, knowing that you cannot control sales in trad. And a lot of times you can't do that much about controlling sales in indie, and you just do your best. And I'm always learning that you do your best, you do what you can, and then let go of the rest. So for me, being hybrid really kind of scratches all of those itches.
So I'm ADHD suspecting.
Yes, girl.
I'm working on a diagnosis. And I've never heard that explained. And it makes so much sense because I also write in a zillion different genres.
Yes.
And the amount of anxiety that I used to have, like, I didn't realize how much I had until I stopped traditional publishing. Like, I cut my contract, like I gave them my option, and then I was like, no. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And given that distance, I'm like, oh, this actually feels good.
Yes.
Like, writing feels good again. Publishing feels good. It's stressful, but in like a good way.
In a good stress way. In the stress way that you get up at 4:30 in the morning and work for 5 hours on a day off and don't forget to drink tea. It's just, and I didn't take my medicine that morning because it was a day off. I didn't even consider it. And then I looked up 5 hours later. I'm like, oh, I probably should have taken my medicine.
Yeah. It would have helped the focus, maybe
and it would have reminded me to get tea.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. So conversely, what do you think are some of the pitfalls of being a hybrid author?
I was thinking about this. I don't see any pitfalls with being a hybrid author. I really feel like it's just such an awesome place to be. And since you know me from the podcast world, you know that I have been really backing away from traditional publishing. I still want to be there. I still want to have that chance of being read by everybody. And I still want books to be in there every once in a while, but the control of being able to do everything myself in indie is just so attractive to me. I enjoy all of it. Yeah. But I don't see any pitfalls of doing both. Back in the day, 10 years ago, people say, oh, but she self-publishes. Nobody says that anymore because even the big four, the big five, no, oh God, no, she self-publishes. That means she knows how to do it. That means she's making money over there. We're never going to get her. Yeah. But there is still crossover happening. I cannot name names, but I know somebody, friend of mine, who last week made a healthy 7-figure deal because of her indie books. They came to her and they offered her so much money she could not refuse. And I was like, yes, that is the way to be hybrid right there. That's the dream.
Yeah. When they come knocking on your door
and then just keep throwing money at you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you still, if that happens, you still have the knowledge. Well, sure, I'll write for them. If it goes well, great. And if not, I know how to self-publish and I'll go back to that.
Right. Yeah. And there's also, do you find like the way that you look at contracts now is a little different?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Rights reversion specifically.
Also thinking about all of the forms that we don't understand yet. Like, nobody write anything in about, AI, NFTs into my contracts because we just don't know enough yet to know what rights we're giving away. That has to be stricken out. But that is when you have a good agent, you don't have to worry about that so much. She always their job for you is to advocate. Everything gets stricken out that can. And the thing about contracts from traditional publishers, this, is they're made to be fought back on. They're boilerplate. They're never expecting somebody to sign them and send them back. My pages are just covered with crossing out that I never would have figured out. So even if you don't have an agent and get a contract, that's something to hire a literary attorney to help you with.
Yes. I've never had an agent. So I've had to.
Yeah. So you had to do all that yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's hard.
Yeah. And I have to say the first few, thankfully they haven't come back at me, or I kept getting contracts. I didn't hire anyone. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I didn't have an agent. And eventually I hired a literary lawyer, and then I used Authors Guild, and I found the Authors Guild lawyer was awesome.
That's actually the best case scenario right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I kept my film rights for both these books.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. And those are the kind of things we need to keep.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially like the top one is a Christmas book. And I have like dreams of Hallmark, Netflix or Lifetime. I'm not picky.
Exactly. Well, they need the content. Yep.
Yes. So
I have another friend who is in negotiations right now for that kind of thing for a Christmas novella. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. So do you feel like you've made any mistakes in your hybrid authoring?
I feel like I make mistakes all the time. But I think that's awesome. I feel like I was just talking about this with another friend this morning, that it feels like this grand science experiment. I think this is a mistake, but I haven't decided what to do about it yet. And I'll just, in the interest of transparency. So I got those, I got all 5 books. There's actually 6 books in that very first series, because there's a long novella attached to it too. And when I got them back, I decided to recover them, and rom-com, the cartoon covers were kind of blowing up again, which I love. I think they're so cute. And I got to do this cool thing where I re-edited those first 3 books. Well, okay, I had to, because they came out so long ago that the copy edits that I got were on paper. So yeah, so I couldn't just take my final version and republish it. I had the version full of errors. So I had to get new copy edits done anyway. And while I was doing that, I decided to bring them up to the standard of my writing where it is now, which is better, 15 years later. So I don't even know how many years later, maybe more. 2006, I wrote that first draft. And so I did that. I recovered them as rom-com. That's why I'm saying it, because I remember that they're really funny books. But here's the thing, I don't think they're rom-com. And that is now being reflected in the reviews of the book. The reviews the star rating is great. They're like more than 2,000 stars, 4.5 or something like that, which is fantastic. That's all I ever look at. But when I do dip down into the actual written reviews, there aren't that many. And they're like, this is not a rom-com. And you're like, you're right. There was like a stalker in that first one. That's not that rom-com-y. But it doesn't make me lose sleep. Number one, because I don't care about reviews, but I do watch to see how they're, how things are being gauged. But all it means is like, oh, should I pull that one and recover it and get a new ISBN, or would I just do a new covers on a series? Or do I like the way that they're selling? They're really flying off the shelf because people like the covers and then they end up liking the book. So I don't know. It's just this, I may have made a mistake by putting a rom-com cover on something that is funny, but not a rom-com, but I don't lose sleep on it. It is just, I'm just always experimenting and iterating and playing. I've been working a lot with trying to get better at ads, and it feels like the same kind of scientific game. I try not to lose money, and otherwise it's all learning. Vast, big mistakes. God forbid, I haven't made any this week. So, but mistakes are okay.
Yeah, definitely. I find it just a huge learning process. And, but that's what makes it so fun being indie is that you can just do whatever you want. You can try a sale, you can try ads, and
exactly.
you have the opportunity to do such things,
to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
The only thing you need to not do is be a jerk. Like as soon as you're a jerk, that's a mistake that you're going to be living with for the rest of your life. And we see that sometimes happen in the author community, but as long as you're not a jerk, you get to do whatever you want.
Yes, exactly. So we briefly touched on marketing earlier, but what do you find is if there's any differences at all between marketing traditional and your indie books?
Well, indie books, that you're in charge of it all. So, I think for me, I take that a little bit more seriously. When I launch something, I actually think about sending out a newsletter and maybe even following up the newsletter with a second newsletter. My email list for my readers list has grown organically over the years, and I haven't had to do much with that. And so that's nice. It's 10,000 people, so it's not enormous, but it's also not small. And they're all there because they want to be. I do rely on them strongly for indie releases. I have to admit, I'm pretty sluggish and reluctant to market traditional books. I don't know why I feel weird about it. I don't like to push. I guess I can't see the money landing in my account, 2 days later. So I always kind of pray to the traditional Barnes and Noble gods for people to walk in the bookstore and pick it up and buy it. And that's on me. I should be doing more. The thing about it is that in most cases, unless you're getting like the 7-figure deal, you're going to be doing you should be doing this exact same kind of marketing for both. I just don't enjoy it as much. for the traditional side as I do for the indie side. But what I do is I do some ads, I do newsletters. I am on all social media platforms because I enjoy all of them, but I really kind of try to restrict the time I spend on them. Like right now, I'm not scrolling anything. I just post 2 things when I want to post to them because I'm friendly and I like people. The only thing I'm scrolling is TikTok, but only a couple times a week. But everything else has been cut out. And so I try to do the things, but I also try not to let it stress me out. For me, the most important thing is always going to be writing the next book and connecting with readers in my newsletter, which I think is important.
I like that. Yeah, I'm always curious about people because I used to be one to promote my trad books, and I actually put ads on a couple of them, which did really well. But then I realized I'm only getting a certain percentage of those sales. So I was like, this could be spent toward editors or covers or anything like that. So
exactly. Yeah. And it's really attractive to want to do that. But then we also have to remember that we are not in this to lose money.
Yeah.
I mean, some people write one book and they want their grandchildren to read it, and that's it. And that's fine. And they can spend all the money they want to on it. But for me, this is a business and I need to have a positive return on investment, period. And so I get to play around with that. So that's fun.
That is fun. So how do you capitalize on your backlist?
I can claim almost no credit for it. I have a virtual assistant named Ed, and he is absolutely fantastic. He's a Gen Z, 100% on top of everything. And he's always looking at my backlist and saying, do you want to change this cover? Can I do a box set of these 3 books? He had this great idea. I have 4 series set in one town called Darling Bay, and 3 or 4. I guess 3 series set in that town. And he took the first book from each series and put it into a box set of freebies. And so the box set is free and it's an entrance into each series, which is fantastic because I do love I do first in series free. That's my one tried and true marketing thing that you can't do if you're traditional. And I mean, he came up with that out of the blue sky. And now that directs people to the 3 different series and gets read through and gets consistent downloads. So I guess my advice is if you are bad at using your backlist or utilizing it, find somebody who is good at it, who will look at all the different ways and permutations of how you can do it. And then just say yes when they tell you to do things.
Yeah. I've never heard about that backlist of all of your first. That's amazing. That's
fun.
Great advice.
I think he might have made it up. I don't know, but it's such great. You're already giving those books away for free. And then somebody sees, I can get 3. They could get the same 3 books free if they just push the one click 3 times on 3 different pages, but you're just giving it to them a little bit easier. And then they're addicted to this person and this story and they need the next one. So yeah, but he comes up with all that. And I'm so glad he's made me so much more money than I ever could have because he thinks about these things, because I am the kind of person who once it's out of sight, out of mind, the book is out there. I'm not just, it's done. I don't need to do anything else with it.
Well, plus you're writing books, you're doing all of the creative things. So it's hard. Unless you have a team, Yeah.
And I don't have a team. I just have an Ed and he's fantastic. Like he's the one who gets me book pubs, he's the one who remembers to put in for them every time one is denied. So yeah. He's great.
That's smart. And it's not like you're getting rejected. It's like he's getting rejected.
I'm totally hands off and he doesn't care. Actually, it makes him more stubborn. Every time I get a book rejected, like he gets more like, I'm going to get it. I think I had like 7 or 8 book pubs last year. He gets them constantly because he's so stubborn.
So in your opinion, what's one misconception or myth about being a hybrid author that you'd want other authors to know?
This is more of a mindset thing. And I'm going to say it with a lot of gentle love, because this is an interesting myth thing that happens. I talk to writers who say, well, I don't know if I want to be traditionally published or self-published or hybrid published. And I think it is healthy and important for people to remember that nobody can choose to be traditionally published. And that is messed up and it shouldn't be that way, but it is that way because traditional publishing is a closed system. It is scared. It is tight. The pandemic made things worse. But it's always been bad. It's always been hard to become traditionally published, right? Just period. And that's okay. You can still keep fighting for it. But I think switching the mindset to, I can choose to be indie published and I can choose to attempt to be traditionally published. Those are your choices. And for people who want to choose to attempt to be traditionally published, the second corollary that goes with that is be as stubborn as Ed, like rack up at least 100 rejections from agents. Then those, and when you get an agent, if you get an agent, because agents are also running scared, no one is sure what will sell, what will stick. But if when you get an agent, they might have trouble selling this beautiful book and it to a publisher, and it almost never has anything to do with you, your book, the quality. If you have written the most beautiful book that will change the world and set it on fire, about, let's say, early onset Alzheimer's, but a book came out last month that was about early onset Alzheimer's that did pretty well, either people are going to say, well, no, there's no more room to talk about that, or they're going to, and then rejecting everything that comes across the door. And I'm talking about agents and editors right now, that they see with that in there, or they're going to react differently and say, oh, that one did really well, I need another one. But you never know what is actually going on behind closed doors. If you send your space fantasy about zebras in space to an agent who loves it more than anything she's ever seen before, but she's trying to sell a space fantasy with zebras in it right now, she cannot take you as a client. And she will never tell you that she can't take you as a client because she has a space fantasy about zebras. She's not allowed to do that, but she must reject you, even if it is the best book that ever happened. So you just have to keep being stubborn and know how far you're going to take this book. I've had students and friends with successes of saying, okay, I'm going to rack up 100 rejections on this book from agents, and then I'm going to self-publish it or reevaluate where I am while I'm writing the next book. And then I'm going to do the same thing. But you're always writing forward. You're always moving forward. And you're not a failure. You're never a failure if you don't get into traditional publishing. Traditional publishing in so many ways right now is the failure. So, but if you want it, keep going for it. Just be stubborn as hell.
Yes. I like that. I love that advice. I guess that links into one big piece of advice for authors considering to be a hybrid author. So I guess these would be authors who are already published, wanting to test out the other end.
No matter where you are, whether you're indie, attempting to be trad, or trad and considering dabbling in indie, I guess my advice is that you are not going to kill anyone. Just play and experiment. I used to have this job at 911, and when I was tired and I had a migraine, if I picked up the phone and got the address wrong, typed it in backwards, said something wrong on the air, people could and would die. And we're just writing. We are doing the most amazing job in the whole wide world of making stuff up or talking about our pasts on the page in order to change the world, literally one word at a time. And you get to just play. I think my biggest piece of advice is remember to have fun, because it is so easily forgotten. I don't know about you, but I get really, really tight about like, it's such a hard job. I am not digging ditches. This is not a hard job. I am sitting on my butt and I am moving my fingers and using my brain a little bit on the days that I can brain, and remembering to play. I have a Post-it on my desk and it says, do I like it? Is it fun? Paying taxes is not fun, doing that kind of thing. So we do have to do things that aren't fun. But when I am slogging along in a manuscript and I realize I'm not having any fun, how can I change that? How can I experiment? How can I do something in hybrid that is fun for me? And also maybe think about doing something for my agent. What would be an excellent fun thing to play there? Just remember to have fun and be stubborn. Those are the two most important things, perhaps. Be stubborn. And it is a choice. You get to choose to be stubborn, just like I will keep getting up. I always joke. It's not a funny joke and I should probably stop saying it, but I have PTSD and the P stands for publishing. It's just a game of standing up over and over again. And if you just keep getting up, you'll be fine.
That was great. Thank you so much for answering my questions and everything. But I did want to see where we can all find you and your books on the internet, or if you have anything to promote.
Let's see, because this will probably be going out for a long time as people are looking for things. They can go look for me at rachelherron.com. You can also see if that memoir ever did it sell in a 7-figure deal, or did Rachel self-publish it? Go find out.
I love that.
Right. I would totally check that if I was listening to me. The working title right now, and who knows what it will be, but it is complete. So that's the working title of that one. And but I would like to encourage anybody, if you have liked anything that I have said, or want to yell at me for anything that I've said, you can sign up for my email newsletter for writers, which is something I really enjoy writing. And that's at rachelherron.com/write. And I just send out encouraging emails every few weeks. And I try to kind of give away all of the secrets that I have learned the hard way to make things a little bit easier for other people. So I would love it if you join me over there.
Great. Perfect.
Thank you so much.
So great. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.